Welcome to Redefining Real Estate. I'm Rylan.
And I'm Morgan. Expect a mix of education, humor, and authentic conversation as we explore all things real estate.
Let's jump into today's episode.
All right, today we're going to be talking about whether it is the right time to buy or whether you should put things on hold and wait a little bit longer to see what's going to happen with the housing market. We are at the end of March 2025. So I wanted to bring up, some of our personal client experiences and how they are taking advantage of what's going on in the market and how some are maybe deciding to wait. So, yes. Rylan, if you want to kick us off with, what you've been seeing recently.
Yeah, so here in College Station, obviously we have the campus. That's a big thing for us here in town. It definitely keeps us active the majority of the time. Even when it is slow, we have Aggie parents all the time looking into it. But I have some clients right now, and they're really trying to figure out if they should utilize the timing of the day right now, or if they should wait till later in the summertime to look a bit more seriously for their student who just recently moved in here. But so we've been going back and forth on that, and their situation's unique, obviously. So that's been a tricky thing that we've been kind of figuring out. But it looks like after a lot of discussion and a lot of time and reasoning that mid-April is going to be about perfect for them to go under contract. That has a lot of different variables in it, but that's kind of what we're seeing right now. It's kind of a weird time of year. I feel like we're approaching that super busy season. You see a lot more competition in the market. You may not be getting as good of a deal sometimes if you're doing resale. So those are the conversations I'm having right now.
Yeah, I agree. I'm seeing the same thing, especially with Aggie parents, because I think a lot of people are getting their renewal notices. The students are getting their apartment notices. And so I think they're having those conversations with their parents like, hey, am I supposed to renew next year? What's the deal? And the good thing, if you are looking to invest or looking to buy, most people have their leases set in place until June or July, maybe sometimes August.
Yes.
So you can find a property that may have tenants already in it, and can pay some of the bills for the next couple of months, right?
Correct. Yeah, that was one of the conversations we had. That was originally what this investor, Aggie parent, dad guy, I don't really know which one to call him, but I'll just say client, a little bit easier. But that's what my client was initially looking into. It was like, hey, this is my first investment property. Why don't I, buy something now with tenants in it, and then hopefully their lease ends in late June. I'll have a month to turn the property, do any repairs I need to do. Have time for my son to move in, and then his lease is up in August, so it all kind of worked out. But turns out that's not really what he was wanting to do after further investigation.
After y'all went out and actually saw tenant-occupied properties, or?
Yes, that and understanding what it looks like to be a landlord to completely random people. He, again, this is his first time investing. He's not a big people person. He didn't want to take over those leases and then have to deal with the moving out process and all of that. The students that would be occupying, his son has grown up with their whole lives.
Oh, okay.
They're all family friends. They're all kind of backing him up to go buy this property, and then they're all like, yeah, we'll pay you, we'll do this, we'll set our own leases, all those things. So he feels a lot more comfortable with those situations versus complete strangers who knows what they're going to do to the property, those kind of things, which to typical real estate investors, that's not a big deal because you have to have someone in there. But for him, this isn't like his main source of income. It's somebody's trying to do. He's just being the guy that's going to buy the property for the kids. So yes, after seeing those properties, we talked a lot in between each one. So that was kind of that day that we figured all that out. But that's why I was saying mid-April, because then he could close sometime in May.
Right.
And then I think it was 1 month of vacancy, which he was okay with, and then tenants after that.
Right, and they start moving in. Yeah. I find that situation that you mentioned, where one Aggie parent is buying, and then they have family friends back home that also have all these kids that are going. I think that situation is super common, and if you can be the one to help them out, I think, like you said, figuring out whether they're comfortable with inheriting tenants or taking over a property of people they don't know is going to be really important to them. And I know for my clients that have been in that situation, they typically go with new construction or depending on where they're buying, like I had one buying the barracks, and now we have it listed, the 4-4. But he was okay with like whenever I walked through the house, I let him know the condition of the property because he didn't actually come down to see it when he bought it. But,
okay, gotcha.
letting them know the condition of the property, and they know like, okay, well, students are probably going to be living in the barracks. This is kind of what to expect.
Right.
And if it's not their first investment, they may be more likely to like lean towards inheriting leases. But I think what you mentioned as far as people wanting like someone else to pay the bills until their kid moves in is ideal. But then once they start thinking about it and thinking about them being strangers and having to like enforce things that they're not used to doing, then that might be really uncomfortable for them.
Without a doubt. And yes, yeah, it's for him, he feels a lot more comfortable with whenever he like really knows the tenants, which I feel like is not very common at all in the real estate game, especially if you're an investor with, multi-units and all that stuff all over town. But yeah, I think you're exactly right. He's just kind of getting his feet wet with all of this. He's not looking to buy a bunch of stuff. He's just looking to get something solid, not a whole lot of maintenance. That was another big thing. So new construction is definitely on the table. But he's also looking to kind of maximize location too. So that's a big thing. He wants to be really close to the campus, So it's been an interesting process, but he's excited to get into it, and obviously so am I, and hopefully we can find him something good.
Yeah, so with that, it sounds like for him it's going to make more sense to wait a couple of months because of his particular situation with his timeline and his son's timeline.
Right.
For other people that aren't investors that actually do live here, are you finding right now that it is still advantageous to get in the market and start looking, even if their lease isn't up for a couple months or they don't plan to put their house on the market for a couple months, or what are you seeing?
For sure. There's a lot of people right now that aren't really looking to compete in multiple offer situations. They're kind of in the mindset of like, oh, the market's slow right now because interest rates are high. They don't realize that we're still seeing great numbers from our market. Like we're still super busy. I think you and Andy also are going into multiples here and there.
Yeah.
I haven't had that yet, but that's still a very possible outcome for any listing you go at, especially anything like under 300,000. So having that conversation like, hey, yeah, we can definitely wait, but are you prepared to maybe pay 10,000 over or go into multiples and maybe not get as good of a deal or anything like that? Those are the conversations I'm having, and almost every time it's like, no, I don't really want to do that. Also, like, are you sure there's even going to be that multiple offer situation or that much competition because of interest rates or whatever it may be? But yeah, that's kind of what I'm seeing, and it's hard to have that conversation as a hypothetical, like a what if. Like, I don't really want to say what if all the time, but these are questions that need answers if that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, for most people, it's hard to envision going into multiple offers if they've never experienced it, because it's so, like, you have really no sense of urgency. If it's not the one, then don't move forward. But then as soon as there's a possibility that this potential option could be taken from you, then I feel like people's perspective on everything changes.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Are you seeing that pretty commonly right now?
I have a couple of buyers that I'm looking with that properties go into multiples within a day or two after coming on the market. And these people that I'm looking with are very deal driven. Like they're looking for a good deal, even though they're not investors. They're like wanting a good deal. They don't mind like cosmetic stuff that they have to take care of. So, when an 1,800 square foot house comes on the market in the middle of College Station, on the bus route, and it's listed for $215, they're like sending it to me immediately. And then I'm checking in with the listing agent and they're like, oh, I already have a cash offer.
Yep.
So I think that's, especially in 300,000 and lower,
Yes.
people have to understand it's not just you that's living here that's looking, it's also Aggie parents or other real estate investors that are looking for a deal.
Yep.
And so if you are deal driven, right now could be a good time to start looking, especially at new construction, because then you can kind of pace things out a little bit further.
For sure.
But if you're only interested in resale, then it's just going to be a little bit more competitive when it comes to the good deals, or you may have to look into one that's been on the market for a while, because the ones that come up right now that are attractive and priced well, they're going quickly. For
sure. And the buyer pool on those things are huge, right? Everyone's looking at College Station near campus under 300,000 as fast as they can, right? Especially right now. And as we keep getting closer and closer to summer, even in summer, like that's just gonna be how it is. If you're new to College Station or it's your first time buying on College Station, you may not kind of get that right off the jump. Obviously, that's kind of our expertise to kind of tell you how the market's going. But yeah, I 100% agree with you.
Yeah, so what have you been doing for your clients that aren't necessarily in a hurry to move but would like to buy? Like, for example, say their lease doesn't end until June or July, but they're interested in moving quicker if possible.
Yeah, I mean, my first step is going to be strategy session, obviously.
Right.
Just kind of talking about that timeline, figuring out what's the actual ideal time to move. If it's closer to their lease being up, then yes. But if they can get in something sooner, which is going to be easier for them, then that's where we'll go. It's hard to answer those questions because it's so situational, but I was the first thing I always do is just sit down and then seeing kind of what their personal goals are and then kind of speaking to those a little bit. And then, if they're going to be leveraging money with financing, then talking to a mortgage lender, seeing where that's at. Because as you and I know, it's always good to kind of talk to a lender sooner rather than later. Because if you are going to be moving in, let's say July, and you learn that there's a couple things you could fix to like really strongly qualify in May or June, that's going to be huge for you. Versus waiting till the very end. Credit needs a little something, but you don't have the time to do that, and then you kind of just mess that up. So that's going to be my answer, but I would assume yours is somewhat similar, but what's yours?
Yeah, same thing. Obviously, sit down with a real estate professional and talk through your timeline. I explain to a lot of people how the payment works whenever you are going to buy, because a lot of people don't want to have double payments with either their current house or their current rental. So if we can reverse engineer your timeline to say, okay, if we make an offer by this date, then your closing is this date, you get the keys to move in, and your first payment isn't until this date. So I usually say from the time we submit an offer to your first payment, it's typically going to be around 60
to
90 days. So we can always talk those specifics when we meet in person. At the same time, knowing that information may allow you to say, okay, well, now that I know it's going to be 3 months before my first payment, now I feel comfortable getting approved and looking at the numbers. Because like you said, if there's something you can do with your credit, or at least just know what the payments are going to look like earlier, the better decision you can make when it comes to actually looking at houses. But I know a lot of times we'll get people in touch with the lender. They'll, tell them, here are some of our recommendations for credit, but people don't get right now with rates being so high, the higher your credit score can be, the better, because the lower the interest rate you'll be able to get qualified for. So even if you think you have a good credit score at 680, say for example, you may have your credit ran, and there's just a couple of things you can do to tweak that over the next month or so to get pushed above 700 or 720 and get you in a different bracket for the approval on interest rates.
Yeah, and that would be huge for people because that is the big talk right now is interest rates. So if you can find any way to lower that number in this market, that's going to be a very big deal for you.
Yes, and speaking of lowering your interest rate, have you had any clients go with any builders that are offering incentives, or what are you seeing right now?
I have. I closed on one last week that went with a new construction home. He took advantage of the incentives. It was a 4.9 interest rate and then some cash at closing as well. He didn't necessarily have to have those two things, but he wanted a deal. And he wanted something low maintenance and just kind of an easy process. So that's what we went with. And he was super excited at the very end. Very smooth transaction.
Yeah, new construction can be great for these types of clients that are looking for a deal, because you're typically going to see incentives right now while the demand from buyers is a little bit lower before we go into summer. So I know Stylecraft is still offering like the 10K your way. Yes. And then they have a preferred lender that you can use where you can get lower interest rates. So that's one of the big ones that my clients have been looking at. And then just looking at new construction in general can be nice, because you can sign a contract today and know that you can close in a couple of months when the house is finished. Or even I've had some clients where we've gone under contract on a move-in ready home, but we asked the builder to push out the closing date to 45 days instead of 30. So typically that means you get an extra paycheck, so you have some extra funds to use for that closing. And then also you can push back your first payment just a little bit further.
Yes.
And so there can be some costs associated with having them hold the house a little bit longer, two extra weeks. But in the long run, if you can get a full extra paycheck under your belt, then that may be worth it to you.
Yeah, it would make it a little bit easier of a process. If you have to do some random purchase or expense with the home, it's not going to necessarily like be over budget or anything like that. So that's a good technique for sure. I like that. New construction is notorious for having those things. I know in March I've been seeing a lot like St. Patrick's Day, like good luck, all these things. I think one of the builders, I think it was D.R. Horton, they were doing like a $100 deposit for the home, and then like another like I think it was 10,000 or 5,000, some dollar amount towards you at closing. So, I mean, putting only $100 down and moving into a home, obviously you still have closing costs, but still,
right?
The incentive is there, so that's definitely something cool, and it just makes it a little bit more attractive. For sure.
Yes, yeah. And so for people that are not interested in new construction, what have your clients been doing, or what have they been experiencing just looking at resale homes?
More competition.
Okay.
I'll say that. We've been looking at some homes, and it was the exact situation just described earlier. 1,800 square foot home. I think it was actually a 4.3. It was converted, garage conversion. Very well done, by the way. But vacant home on the bus route. I think it was listed at 295. So right under 300,000. Bus route, remodeled, garage conversion. Multiples within the coming soon.
Yeah.
And they held an open house just to see if they can get anything else, a little bit more maybe, and then after that it was gone. So super fast turnaround. My client loved the home, but he wasn't necessarily ready to jump on it right then and there. And that was the situation for I think maybe like 2 or 3 out of the 6 homes I looked at that day. Just great houses, but I mean they're just gone. Just so fast. There's been some homes that have been sitting, but they're sitting for reasons, majority of the time it's maintenance things and stuff like that people may not be willing to take on. So there's that, but yeah, we have been seeing a lot of competition versus like in the wintertime, that house situation I just described may have been for like a month or 2 or something.
Right.
But yeah, that's what I'm seeing right now.
I am seeing the exact same thing. During December and January, things were so slow.
Yes.
And so it's hard for people who you may have been showing then, or even just doing research then, to then come into a market where it's going into multiples for houses that they fall in love with. So I think setting those expectations are important, and just knowing like how cyclical our market can be. But sometimes it's random. Like April is going to be a huge month for us and the team, because we had so many buyers that were looking and waiting, and then all of a sudden like interest rates dropped just a little bit, and everybody started looking and making offers, which caused our clients to actually move forward on things.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's worth noting too, like if summertime is going to be your ideal time, that's great. It's not like we're pushing anything sooner than that. It's really up to you what works best, but obviously it's our job to figure out when that timeline is going to be perfect. But something just to consider is like you may be overpaying for a home that necessarily may not be worth something, but if it's a long-term investment, it may make sense for you.
Right. And one of the things that I've talked about with my clients going into summertime is just the difference in inventory. We should be seeing a lot more inventory come summer, but also so many people are out there with 3-4% interest rates that do not want to move, and understandably so. Like even if they have $100,000 in equity, they don't want to get rid of that interest rate. And so many people are still holding on to their properties and not selling them. So we would typically see more inventory in the summertime, but we don't know if we will this year because of the situation with rates and whether people are going to actually move up, go from their first home to their next home or vice versa.
Yeah, for sure. My neighbors actually listed their home, I think for like $329 or something next to me, and it sold within a week, and it was pretty crazy actually. They already took the for sale sign out of the yard. It hasn't closed, but they already pulled the sign up and everything, which
Confidence.
I think maybe may not be my style of business, but good for them at least. Hopefully they got what they were looking for. But yeah, even like I live kind of on in Bryan, nowhere near the bus route, nowhere near campus really. So it was interesting to see that home go as fast as it did. It kind of shows you that it's not just Aggie parents or students or something like that. It's everyone. It's everywhere, right?
Yes.
So increased market activity for sure, and I'm very optimistic on the inventory for sure.
Yeah, I agree. Is there anything else that you think would be helpful to talk about as we're just kind of thinking through whether people should buy now or wait? It really sounds like for every single person, it's beneficial to talk with a trusted real estate professional and see what their recommendation is based on, market activity and what other clients that they have are doing.
Yeah.
But I'm just trying to think, many of my clients are just going the new construction route right now because it's easy to lock something in and
For
have
sure.
it brand new.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for most of my buyers, you're either, there's a spectrum of how much work you're willing to put into a home.
Right. For
Some
sure.
people are on the I want to move in and it be move-in ready, and I don't want to deal with competition, so we go new construction.
Yeah, I think that's always the easy conversation to have. It's it becomes more difficult in my opinion when it comes down to location. If they want to be in the heart of town or right next to the campus. There's communities out there, right? But majority of our new construction is kind of on the outskirts. It's a little bit further from campus. But yeah, that's always a great conversation to be having. Even if they are looking for something a little bit closer, closer may mean a 15-minute drive, not 40,
Right.
So who knows? Yeah, it's all very situational, I feel like. But yeah.
Cool. Well, if you guys have any questions about any part of the buying process, or if you're looking into maybe potentially buying sometime later this year or next year, feel free to reach out to us. We have our social media links down below. And if you made it all the way to the end of this episode, please make sure you subscribe and share it with a friend who may be also doing research into buying a home and trying to figure out whether right now is the right time. So hit us up on social medias and we will see you on the next one.
Thanks for hanging out with us today. We hope you found something useful or at least had a good time listening.
Yeah, if you enjoy this episode, feel free to subscribe or share it with someone who might enjoy this content.
And if you have any questions or topics you want us to cover, reach out to us on Instagram. Everything will be linked below for you.